If you don't put down $5,000 in the next 10 minutes, he dies. Mara pressed both hands to the glass and watched the doctors pumping on Ethan's chest while blood soaked through the white sheets beneath him. And on her shaking left hand, under the cold hospital lights, the wedding ring he had slipped onto her finger 12 weeks earlier suddenly looked less like a promise and more like a price. If stories like this stay in your chest long after they end, subscribe, like the video, and tell me where you're watching from before we begin, because this one doesn't let go easily. "Please," Mara whispered. "Please save him." The woman at the front desk didn't even look cruel. That was the worst part. She looked tired, ordinary, like she'd said it too many times to too many desperate people. "I'm sorry," she said. "The trauma surgeon won't start without authorization or payment." "He was stabbed saving somebody." "I understand." "No, you don't." Ethan had been walking home from the garage when he saw two men trying to drag an elderly man out of his car. Ethan had never known how to walk away from trouble. He stepped in. One of them ran. The other buried a knife just under Ethan's ribs. Now he was 27, bleeding out behind glass, and the world was waiting for a receipt. Mara looked at her ring. It wasn't expensive. Anyone else would have missed what it was. Ethan had made it himself from melted family gold, his father's broken tie clip, his mother's thin bracelet, the little bit of chain from the necklace Mara's mother used to wear before cancer took her when Mara was 16. "It's ugly," Ethan had joked when he proposed, his hands blackened from work, voice shaking harder than hers. "It's perfect," she had cried. Now it was the only perfect thing she owned. She tore it off her finger and ran. Rain slapped her face as she sprinted down the block in blood-streaked scrubs she'd borrowed from a nurse because Ethan's blood had dried on her blouse. The pawn shop 2 streets over was closing. She shoved the door before the metal gate could come down. The owner glanced up. "We're closed." She slammed her ring onto the glass counter. "How much?" He picked it up lazily, then more carefully when he saw the gold. "Custom piece." "How much?" He waited, turned it, squinted. 1,800. She stared at him like she hadn't heard. "That's robbery." "No," he said. "This is a pawn shop." She grabbed the ring back, ran into the rain again, and tried 2 jewelry stores that were dark, one check-cashing place that laughed, and one old man at a gold exchange counter who said he could do 4,000. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. Tomorrow was a coffin. She ran back to the pawn shop, chest burning, vision blurring, and dropped the ring on the counter one more time. 5,000, she said. "Please." He shrugged. "I said 18. Tears mixed with rain on her lips. "My husband is dying." He stared at her for a long moment, then opened the register. 2,300. Final. "It's worth more." "Not to me." She swallowed. "I need the money now." "Then you need to decide now." Her fingers stayed on the ring for one last second. She remembered Ethan sliding it onto her hand in their tiny apartment kitchen because he couldn't afford a restaurant. He had cooked pasta badly, burned the garlic bread, and gotten down on one knee on cracked linoleum anyway. She let go. The pawn shop owner counted out the bills. Mara took them with both hands, like she was lifting part of her own body off the counter. When she ran back into the hospital, soaked through, hair plastered to her face, she slapped the cash down so hard it scattered. "Start," she said. "Please, just start." They took the money, and behind those swinging doors, Ethan disappeared. For 6 hours, no one told her anything. At 2 in the morning, a surgeon finally came out with bloodshot eyes and said, "He made it through the operation. The next 24 hours are critical." Mara didn't cry right away. She sat down, looked at her bare hand, and then she broke so hard the vending machine beside her rattled. But the worst part wasn't over. When Ethan woke up 3 days later, pale and stitched from chest to stomach, the first thing he asked for wasn't water. It wasn't pain meds. It wasn't even her. It was the ring. He lifted his trembling hand and looked around the room like he expected to see it glinting somewhere. "Mara," he rasped, "your hand." Her heart stopped. For one crazy second, she almost told him, "I sold it to keep your heart beating. I sold our vows so you could keep breathing. I would do it again." But Ethan looked so fragile. Tubes in his arms, bruises around his throat, guilt already filling his eyes because he knew exactly what kind of bills were piling up. He had grown up hearing one thing from his mother his whole life: a real man provides. He could barely sit up. If she told him then, he would hear only one thing: "You almost died because you couldn't afford to live." So she forced a smile. "I took it off in the waiting room. I didn't want to lose it." He relaxed, just a little. "Good," he whispered, then drifted back to sleep. That lie was small. At first, Mara got a second job at a diner 2 weeks later, then a third doing overnight inventory at a pharmacy. Every extra dollar went into an envelope hidden in the freezer behind a bag of frozen peas. "Ring fund," she wrote once, then scratched it out because even seeing the words hurt. She went back to the pawn shop every Friday. "Has anyone bought it?" "Not yet." "Can I leave a deposit?" "No." "Please don't sell it." The man sighed the 4th time she came in. "Lady, it's inventory." On the 6th Friday, he didn't even let her finish asking. "It's gone." Something inside her dropped. "To who?" "Can't say." "You have records." "And I have privacy laws." She pressed both palms to the counter. "I'll pay more." "It's sold." "Then call them." "No." "Please." He finally looked annoyed enough to be honest. "A collector bought it, paid cash, out of town. It's gone." Mara stood there so long the old radio behind the counter changed songs twice. When she got home, Ethan was awake on the couch, angry in the quiet way he'd become angry since the stabbing. Recovery was turning him into someone he hated. His left side was weak. He couldn't lift a transmission, couldn't work full shifts, couldn't even open jars some mornings without wincing. The man who once fixed other people's engines with his bare hands now needed help pulling on a t-shirt. And Ethan hated pity more than pain. "Where were you?" he asked. "At work." "You smell like coffee." "Diner shift." He stared at her. "You got another job?" "We need the money." His jaw tightened. "I said I'd figure it out." "With what, Ethan?" Wrong words. His face changed. Not louder. Worse. Colder. "Right," he said. "With what?" Mara sat beside him, instantly sorry. "That's not what I meant." "Yes, it is." "No, I just—" He stood too fast, grabbed his side, and almost fell. She jumped up, but he pulled away from her hand like her touch burned. For the first time since the hospital, Mara felt fear that had nothing to do with losing him physically. It was fear of losing the man inside him. Months passed. His body healed faster than his pride. By spring, Ethan was back at the garage part-time. By summer, he was working nearly full days again, though he hid the pain pills in the bathroom cabinet behind shaving cream. He thought she didn't know. She did. She also knew something else. His mother, Lorraine, had started showing up too often. Lorraine never liked Mara. She thought waitresses from poor neighborhoods trapped men with kind eyes and hungry stories. She'd smiled at the wedding for pictures, and then told Ethan privately he was marrying beneath his future. After the stabbing, she came carrying casseroles and poison. "You look tired," she would say sweetly. "You've lost weight. You work too much. Men can feel when something changes, Mara. Don't make him feel alone in his own home." One afternoon, Lorraine noticed Mara's bare hand while they were setting dishes out. "No ring?" she asked. Mara froze. "I took it off." Lorraine's eyes sharpened. "Did you? It needs resizing." Lorraine smiled without warmth. "Of course." That night, Ethan asked casually, "Where is it?" Mara looked up from folding laundry. "The ring? How many things do I give you to wear on that finger?" She tried to laugh, but it came out thin. "I told you, it needs resizing." "Then why hasn't it come back?" "Because I sold it for blood and stitches and 6 more years of your heartbeat." Instead, she said, "I've been busy." He nodded, too easily. And somehow that was worse, because doubt had entered the room. It never really left. 2 months later, Mara got a call at the diner. "It's Benny from the pawn shop," the owner muttered. "I got a lead." Her whole body went cold. "What?" "The collector passed through town. Might sell pieces in a private estate auction in Brookline next month. No guarantee." "Can you get me the address?" "Why do you care so much about that ring?" She closed her eyes. "Because my life started with it and ended with it." She drove to meet Benny that night in a grocery parking lot because he didn't want shop drama. Ethan saw them. He had come to surprise her after her shift, with fries from the diner and flowers from a gas station. Because despite everything, part of him was still trying. He parked across the street and watched Mara hand cash to a man in a leather jacket. He saw Benny pass her an envelope. He saw Mara crying. He didn't see the auction card inside it. He only saw secrecy. And when hurt people don't know the truth, they build one. Ethan went home before she did. The flowers were in the trash when Mara walked in. He was waiting at the kitchen table. "What did you sell?" he asked. Her stomach dropped. "What?" "The man in the parking lot. What did you sell?" "Nothing." "Don't lie to me." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just anger, humiliation, fear, the deep, old terror of not being enough. "It wasn't like that," she said. "Then tell me what it was." She opened her mouth. This was it. This was the moment. But before she could speak, Ethan reached into her purse on the table and tossed the auction card in front of her. "Private estate jewelry auction," he read. "What? Were you buying something? With what money? The money we don't have?" Mara stared at the card. You went through my bag? I watched you meet a stranger in a parking lot. I was trying to get something back. What? Her voice broke. Something important. To who? To us. He laughed once. Hard. Funny, because it feels like I'm the only one still acting married. She flinched like he'd slapped her. Then he said the one thing that would live inside both of them for years. If loving me got so expensive, Mara, you should have just let me die that night. Silence. Real silence. The kind that ends things. Ethan regretted it the second it left his mouth. You could see it in his face. But some words don't come back because you're sorry. Mara inhaled shakily, took the auction card off the table, and said in a voice so quiet it frightened him, "Don't ever say that to me again." Then she walked to the bedroom, closed the door, and cried into a pillow so hard she bit the fabric to keep from making a sound. The next morning, she went to the auction anyway. She stood in a room full of rich strangers with polished shoes and cold hands and watched a velvet tray come out carrying pieces of other people's pasts. And there it was. Her ring. Their ring. Small, handmade, imperfect, beautiful. The bidding started at 4,000. Mara had 2,800. By the time the hammer fell, it sold for 11. She never even got to raise her paddle. When she got home, Ethan was setting the table. Like normal people. Like last night hadn't happened. He looked up. Mara. She handed him divorce papers. His face drained. What is this? An end. Because of one fight? One fight? She whispered. You told me I should have let you die. I didn't mean it. You said it. I was angry. And I was there. He stared at the papers like they were written in a language he couldn't read. So that's it? Mara's hand moved to her stomach instinctively. She had found out she was pregnant 3 weeks earlier. She hadn't told him yet. She had been waiting for a good night. A soft night. A hopeful one. That morning, before the auction, she started bleeding in a gas station bathroom 30 miles from home. She sat alone on a tile floor, while a child she had not even gotten to announce slipped out of her life in silence. Now Ethan stood in front of her, asking if this was it. She could have told him about the baby. She could have told him about the ring. She could have opened her chest and dumped every broken piece of herself into his hands. But something in her was too tired to beg to be believed. So she simply nodded and walked away before he could see the bloodstains spreading through her dress. The divorce was fast because neither of them fought hard enough. That was the tragedy. Not screaming, not cheating, not some giant, unforgivable sin. Just pain, pride, exhaustion, and one terrible sentence said at the worst possible moment. Years passed. Ethan took over the garage after the owner retired, expanded it, opened a second location, then a third. People called him successful, but success is loud on the outside and very quiet when you get home. He dated no one seriously, kept working, kept buying things he didn't need, kept telling himself Mara had chosen secrets over him. That was the story that let him sleep. Lorraine approved of that version. She was never built for your life, she would say, as if love had an income requirement. Then, 8 years after the night in the hospital, Lorraine had a stroke. It wasn't fatal, but it stripped her sharpness down to something raw and frightened. Ethan moved her into a private care suite and spent nights going through boxes from her house while nurses checked monitors in the background. That's where he found the tin biscuit container. Inside were receipts, old photographs, and 3 unopened letters with his name on them in Mara's handwriting. His whole body went cold. The first letter was dated 6 weeks after the divorce. Ethan, I came back the day after the papers were signed because I wanted to tell you everything. But your mother met me at the door. She said you were finally sleeping. She said if I loved you, I would stop reopening wounds. I believed her, because I still loved you more than I loved being understood. I sold my ring the night you were stabbed. The hospital would not take you into surgery until I paid. I tried everywhere else first. I begged. I failed. Then I sold it. I thought I could buy it back before you knew. I couldn't. Ethan stopped breathing. His hands shook so badly the paper crackled like fire. He grabbed the second letter. I went to the pawn shop every week. I worked every shift I could. I found the ring once at an auction, but I was too poor to bring it home. Maybe that sounds pathetic, but I needed you to know I tried. I tried until trying started killing parts of me. There was one more thing I wanted to tell you before everything fell apart. I was pregnant. I lost the baby the day of the auction. I was alone. I didn't tell you because by then, I didn't know how to hand you grief without asking for more than you had left to give. Ethan made a sound then. Not a word. Something uglier. A sound a human being makes when truth arrives too late and still somehow manages to split them open. The third letter was shorter. You once told me love is not what people keep. It's what they're willing to lose for each other. I lost the ring. I lost the baby. And somehow, I lost you. But I never lost the truth. If you ever learn it, I hope it is kinder to you than silence was to me. He didn't realize he was on his knees until a nurse touched his shoulder. Lorraine, weak and half-conscious in the next room, began crying when he stumbled to her bedside with the letters in his hand. You knew, he said. She tried to turn away. You knew. Her mouth trembled. I was protecting you. From what? Being loved? She made you weak. No, Ethan said, tears streaming now. She made me alive. Lorraine started to speak, but Ethan backed away like her voice physically hurt him. That same night, he drove to the old pawn shop. Benny was grayer now, heavier, but he recognized Ethan immediately. You're Mara's husband. Ex-husband. Benny looked at the letters in Ethan's hand and went quiet. Ah. How many times did she come here? Benny exhaled. A lot. How many? He swallowed. For almost 2 years. Ethan leaned on the counter because suddenly standing felt impossible. She sold that ring to save your life, Benny said softly. I figured you knew. No one told me. She never wanted credit. Benny hesitated. Only the ring back. Who bought it? Benny opened an old ledger and ran a finger down a page. Collector named Daniel Voss, estate broker. He died 3 years ago. His daughter liquidated part of the collection. I remember because your ring had an inscription. Unusual piece. Ethan's voice broke. Where is it now? 3 days later, he found it in a private gallery in Connecticut, displayed under warm lights behind glass like art. He bought it for $43,000. He would have paid $400. When the curator placed it in his palm, Ethan almost dropped it. It was lighter than memory. He turned it over and saw the inscription he had carved by hand with a cheap tool and too much hope. For all my tomorrows. He sat in his car afterward and cried until his shirt was wet through. Then he asked the only question that mattered now. Where is Mara? The answer cut almost as deep as the letters. 2 towns over, working at a public library. Stage 2 heart failure. On a transplant list she might not survive long enough to reach. By sunset, he was outside the library, clutching the ring so hard its edges marked his skin. Mara was closing up when she saw him through the glass. For a second, she didn't move. Then she unlocked the door. Time had changed her, but not gently. There were silver threads in her dark hair, tiredness beneath her eyes, a thinness around her wrists that looked like life had been quietly taking pieces for years. But Ethan saw only Mara. The woman in the hospital hallway, the woman in the rain, the woman he had failed. She looked at the ring in his hand first, then at the letters, and all the color drained from her face. So, she said softly, you know. I know. Neither moved. The whole room felt suspended. Finally, Ethan said, Why didn't you tell me? A sad smile touched her mouth. I tried. No, I mean that night, in the kitchen. Before everything. She looked down at her bare hand. Because when you said I should have let you die, something in me realized the truth wouldn't save us if trust was already gone. He covered his face for a second, shattered by the accuracy of it. I was wrong. I know. I was cruel. I know. I loved you. At that, Mara finally looked up. Her eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall yet. Then why did it always feel like I had to prove it? That question went straight through him. Because there is no defense against the truth you earned. Ethan stepped closer. I can't undo what I did. No. I can't give you back those years. No. I can't bring back our baby. Mara shut her eyes. One tear escaped. No. He opened his hand between them. The ring glowed softly in his palm. But if there is anything left in this world that mercy will allow me to do, he whispered, let me not be too late twice. She stared at the ring as if it were a ghost. Then she laughed once through her tears. A tiny, broken sound. You found it. I should have found the truth first. He told her about the letters, about Lorraine, about Benny, about the auction record, the gallery, the miles he drove with regret sitting in the passenger seat. When he finished, Mara was crying quietly. Not because the story was new, because it was finally shared. I waited a long time for you to know, she said. Then I stopped waiting. That hurt less. He shook his head. No, it didn't. She almost smiled. You always did think you knew my pain better than I did. He deserved that, so he took it. And then he did the first unselfish thing he had done in a long time. He asked, what do you need? Not, what do you forgive? Not, can we start over? Not, do you still love me? Just, what do you need? Mara sat down heavily in the chair by the desk. A heart that works, she said, with exhausted honesty. Time. Less fear. A little peace. You'll have all of it. You can't promise that. No, he said. But I can stay. She looked at him for a long moment, measuring whether this version of Ethan was real. Then, very slowly, she held out her hand. His fingers trembled as he slid the ring back on. It fit. Of course it did. Some things remember where they belong, even after being lost. The transplant came 11 days later. Ethan didn't leave the hospital once. He slept in waiting room chairs, argued with insurance coordinators, signed checks without looking at the total. And when fear crawled into him at 3 a.m., he sat by Mara's bed and told her stories she had missed from the years they'd spent apart. The surgery lasted 9 hours. This time, when the doctor came out, Ethan was the one standing behind glass, praying money would not be the thing that decided who lived. This time, it wasn't. "She made it," the surgeon said. Ethan's knees nearly gave out. When Mara woke, he was there. Older, ruined and repaired in all the wrong places, and crying openly. She looked at him, then down at the ring still on her hand, and smiled the smallest, strongest smile he had ever seen. "You stayed," she whispered. "For all my tomorrows," he said. Months later, on the anniversary of the night she sold her ring, Ethan stood beside Mara outside a new building downtown. Not a garage, not a business. A trauma assistance fund for emergency patients who couldn't afford surgery deposits. Her name was above the door, not because she asked, because some debts are paid with truth, some with money, and some only with a life spent honoring the person who bled for yours in silence. Ethan took Mara's hand as people gathered, cameras flashed, and the ribbon trembled between the scissors. He leaned close and said, "I used to think the worst thing a person could lose was love." Mara squeezed his fingers. "No," she whispered back. "The worst thing is learning love was there all along, and calling it something else." He looked at her then, not as a memory, not as a wound, not as the woman he had failed to trust, but as the reason he was still alive to become better. And when the ribbon fell, Ethan didn't hear the applause first. He heard a heartbeat. Hers. Still here. Still his miracle. Some people wear love on their finger. Some people prove it with blood, silence, and years of heartbreak. And sometimes, the most expensive thing in the world is the truth you were given too late. Have you ever learned, after it was almost gone, what someone truly sacrificed for you?